This is Jamie Dyer welcoming you to another edition of the Quo-Cast. And in this edition, myself and author and musician Greg Harper will be taking a look at Status Quo's 18th studio album, released 35 years ago this month, Ain't Complaining. Welcome to the podcast, Greg. You were the author of Status Quo in the 1980s. What do you think of this album as a general?
Thanks for having me, Jamie. Again, I'm becoming a regular fixture now, which is nice. Ain't Complaining is an album representative of a band that are desperately trying to stay relevant and get a hit across the pond in America. Neither of which really happened for them, but what we did get out of those sessions is a pretty good middle of the road rock album, really, that's quite commercial sounding. Some people say it's Quo light. I think it's Quo possibly at their most imaginative, personally.
Yes, I think that is certainly the case. Certainly my opinion anyway, and yours too. So let's take a look at this album cover first. You say that this is kind of them reaching for commercial, and this album cover is basically that. This is as far removed from the Status Quo image as you could get, really, especially with the guitars that they were promoting at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. The Charvel guitars, which Rossi and Parfitt have gone on record and said was just purely because someone gave them some money to do it. They didn't get used very much in the studio. I suspect they were used a little bit, and they were certainly used for miming and things on Top of the Pops. But ultimately, I love that photograph. I think it's a really good photograph of the five of them. If I remember rightly, Andy's got a bass as well, hasn't he? Is he playing one of the Charvel basses, Andy?
He might be. It's kind of obscured.
Yeah, but I love the album cover, and they're trying to market it towards non-fans, I suppose. And to be honest, my wife's stepmom, who wasn't a Quo fan before that album came out, was kind of, I'll give that a go. You know, it was quite it was marketed towards people that weren't headbanging, boogie denim types. It was, what's the word? Probably a little more cognitively marketed.
Yeah.
They're trying to appeal to a broader spectrum of people, hence the more middle of the road Radio 2-esque direction.
It's worth noting it's actually Jeff playing the bass on the front cover.
Oh, is it Jeff?
Yes.
Sweet.
Which is even more bizarre because you're like, I know what you were doing there because Andy is a bass player.
He's a wicked bass player.
Yeah. This cover is mainstream. And I can imagine, I was thinking earlier today, if a fan from 1975 after the release of On the Level was transported to 1988, they'd wonder what had happened in the intervening years.
Like they'd accidentally stepped on a butterfly or something, accidentally changed history. Yeah.
The butterfly effect, yes.
Yeah.
So let's go through this track by track, because it's quite interesting, really. So we start off with Ain't Complaining, obviously the title track. And this is, this was a single. Was Griff Rhys-Jones in the video?
He was. The video is so bizarre. It's that someone was doing some drugs or something. There was some very strange decisions being made at the time. But yeah, Griff Rhys-Jones was in the video.
Yeah, I mean the track itself has got one of the most imaginative intros going, and it's worth noting that Pip Williams is the producer on this album, who did Rocking All Over the World and, all of that stuff. We won't go into it. His work isn't always the most sort of well-regarded. But the thing is, for what it is, it's crafted quite well. And that intro in itself, I mean, I use it to test my speakers.
I do as well.
Exactly.
How weird is that? Yeah, whenever I buy a new phone, to check that both speakers on the bottom of my iPhone are working, I always play that track. It's really bizarre. For what it's worth, I love Pip Williams's production, and not just on Quo stuff. I love it on. He made an album with Kiki D. I think he made a couple of albums with Kiki D, but the one with Star on it and Midnight Flyer on it. Just an incredible producer, great writer, and phenomenal guitar player and arranger. For what it's worth, I absolutely love Pip Williams. And how good would it be to get him on this show? That would be so cool, wouldn't it?
It would. We're working on it. We're working on it. Yeah.
Sweet. Man, I'll be listening to that episode several times.
And I do wonder sometimes whether he gets asked about this era of Quo, because it is one that kind of gets left by the wayside because of its mainstreamness and the fact that if you listen to other contemporary tracks from the time, from other bands, this is what they're doing. Literally all of them. I think 88, it does go into that. I mean, Ain't Complaining is probably the closest that Quo ever got to a Stock Aitken, a Waterman sound.
Yeah.
In terms of production.
No, I think you're right. And I think using those drum samples and stuff and using a lot of sampling at the time, which was kind of the in thing. But like you say, it's got that very, very commercial sound. And I think that's a lot to do with Pip. That's definitely a Pip tune. I know it's credited to Rick and Pip. But I can just imagine them getting, hammered one night, blasting that out in demo form. That's Pip trying to get the band a hit record. Mm-hmm. And it almost worked.
Yeah.
It was just too different for most of the Quo fans to find palatable.
It also had one of the most annoying samples in it, in All Right, which, by the way, for this episode, I'm going to go All Right for, at least once every 5 minutes. Yeah. And then, because that's what it felt like. I feel like by track 4, that kind of goes by the wayside.
Yeah. I think they must have just kept it in the sample machine, and thought, oh, yeah, we'll put it on this as well, Like I say, probably a lot of alcohol and a lot of funky substances were imbibed during the process.
Yes. So let's move on to track 2, which arguably to me is one of the best tracks on the album, although Rhino told me it was unfinished or felt unfinished. I don't think so, because certainly that middle section of Every Time I Think of You is like, I'm surprised it wasn't a single.
I'm surprised it wasn't a single. To be honest, I think it's possibly the second or third best track on the album, and it's certainly one of the best tracks of the decade for them. It's just a beautifully crafted pop rock song. It's in the lyric, but it's beautifully put together. And the guitar solo is just nuts. That's definitely Pip playing the guitar solo, because it's so not Francis. It's just not his style. God knows how that opening sound was got. I don't know whether that was played with a slide or whether that was done with some kind of whammy pedal or what, but the opening of that solo just blows me away every time. And then that little hammer-on thing coming up the E string. I just love it, man. I love that track.
Plus the kind of strings that go in between it and stuff. And that in particular is very kind of Benny and Bjorn-esque in the way that it kind of builds into this thing. And then we have a key change, which very rarely happens. I don't think there's really been a key change in a Quo song since Down the Dustpipe.
Yeah, do you know what? That's never even occurred to me. They're not one for key changes, in fairness. There's one in Burning Bridges as well. That goes up a fourth, I think. But yeah, I suppose that's a very Pip thing, though. Pip would have... It's highly likely that when that song was conceived, it didn't have the key change. And that's Pip's arranging head going, we need to lift this last chorus, we need to lift this last verse or whatever. Which is why I think certainly the two albums, Ain't Complaining and Perfect Remedy, Pip's fingerprints are all over those, because it's not just in the way the songs are produced, but it's in the way they're arranged as well. Certainly if you listen to the albums that preceded that, less so within the Army, but certainly with Back to Back and Never Too Late and 1982 and Just Supposing. Because they were left mostly to their own devices, it was just a case of, right, let's just get these tracks down. And I think that care and love that went into the post-production and into the pre-production, the arrangement, that's all Pip. And I think that's what adds to that, I'm going to use the word sophisticated sound. And I think it suits them, personally.
Let's go for track 3, One for the Money. If track 1 is What Happens If Status Quo tries to do Stock Aitken and Waterman, and track 2 is What Happens If they try and do a Phil Collins type number, then track 3 is definitely What Happens If Rick Parfitt takes on a cop show. Like Miami Vice.
Totally. I mean, the chorus is pretty good. It's an okay track. It's a little bit fillery, but there's some good playing on it. And to be honest, that's one thing you can never take away from a Quo track. The playing is always great, even if you don't like the material and the production. You can't fault the playing. Rhino's playing on that is particularly good because he's doing that level 42 thing where the bass part is being doubled by a synth. That takes some doing to get that done accurately and to get it sounding tight and good and still keep the groove in it is quite tricky. So Rhino and Mark King, both great bass players. But that track, again, I feel like Pip had quite a lot to do with that in the production. But it's a pretty good song. You know, I think the verses are a little, dare I say, lazy. But the chorus is pretty catchy.
Yeah, and me, along with many other listeners, wondering how you can move forward in reverse.
Yeah.
But I guess that I was a filmmaker at the time I first heard this. I was studying film, and I was like, so what would happen is you'd have to walk backwards and then reverse the film in order to walk forward, so you'd be walking forward in reverse. It's like overthinking it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Completely.
I kind of like those lyrics though, because I mean, not those particular lyrics, but I like those lyrics that make you go, "What? Huh?" I don't know whether that's just I'm a Beatles fan or what, but I like lyrics that make you stop and go, "Wait, what the hell does that mean?" Mm-hmm. It makes you think about the meaning and the lyric more, and I think you're more likely to get that kind of analysis. Do you remember GCSE English? You know, analysing poems and stuff. You know, used to give you a nosebleed. It's I used to love that stuff, especially when you're like, what the hell? What does he mean there? And it makes you think a little more deeply, I think. So yeah, I like those weird little metaphors.
Yeah, and the dog agrees. So let's move on to track 4. I'm gonna set an internal timer because I've done a whole episode on this one song. Another Shipwreck, originally released in 1978 for Andy Bown. Right. It was an Andy Bown track, and the original was very disco. This, I'm going to keep coming up with things. This is what would happen if Huey Lewis and the News, circa Back to the Future, had a go at something. This is very that. The drum sound is very prominent. Those keyboards way up in the mix, but we shall talk about the keyboards in just a moment and how Andy gets all the flack for no reason, really. And the fact that they changed it from the original arrangement, that ending, which is probably a Pip thing again, to make it incredibly 80s, but just rounds it off in a way that the original doesn't do. Go ahead.
I think it's the best track on the album, and I think it's certainly harmonically the most sophisticated track they ever. I think it's the most harmonically sophisticated track they ever made, and Andy and Pip have this penchant for writing chord sequences with pedaled bass parts. So where the bass note stays the same and the chords change around it. And that song is just full of that stuff. So again, really sort of harmonically sophisticated. And like you say, that ending's just fabulous. It's so classy. It really rounds the track off. And the thing is, it's a beautiful lyric as well. Again, Pip and Andy have really done a great job on that track, I think. And I love Andy's original. But I think Quo's just has a quality and a class that he's missing from a lot of Quo records from earlier albums, at least. And if they'd have gone further in that direction, they'd have probably lost more fans. But I think they'd have made stranger music. I think they'd have gone a little more singer-songwritery, a little more experimental, I suppose. I love that track. I absolutely love it.
Me too. First time I heard it, I'd already heard Andy's version because a member of the Status Quo message board sent me his solo album, Good Advice, and so I'd already heard it, and it just blew me away because I was like, I remember liking this track, but then the Quo one was like what on earth? How was this not a single? Certainly after In the Army Now and such like. And the thing is, up until this point in the album, we haven't heard anything that could have gone on to Just Supposing or Whatever You Want or anything like that. Like, it's not really free chordy type stuff. It's like you said, experimental and perhaps a little bit more, to use your phrase, sophisticated than usual. We'll go on to the next track, Don't Mind If I Do, which again is a little bit more in the Quo mold, I suppose, but it's still in that 80s vibe. And I think that's a Rossi and Frost track, isn't it?
Yeah, and I also think that Rhino has something to do with that too. I think Rhino's got a writing credit on that because I think that's the first track that Rhino co-wrote with Francis. I may be wrong on that, but what I do know is that Francis absolutely loved that tune to the point where he said to Rhino, I hope you've got a good publishing deal, because he was convinced that was going to make him a fortune. I mean, it didn't get picked as a single, unfortunately, but it's a great track and it's catchy. And I love that. That little unison run is great. A very Rossi lick, that really. But Rhino's bass playing's great on that too. And I should also mention Jeff, because Jeff's playing on that. I know there's a lot of synthesized drums on there, but to give them the groove required is really hard. To get synth drums to groove is nigh on impossible. And they did it with Jeff Rich, who really nails it on that track in particular. It's just one of those tracks that has a little bounce to it. It's not a shuffle, but it has that. There's a slight lilt to it that just makes your shoulders go up and down. It's a great cut, that.
And it's one of the longer songs on the album. I mean, we've already mentioned One for the Money, which is nearly 5 minutes long, which almost goes into self-indulgence a little. But Don't Mind If I Do, you think just a minute or two longer would be fine. Yeah. A few extra kind of old Quo flourishes.
If I remember rightly, sorry, I'll turn my iPhone off so people sending me messages. There's a really good guitar solo on that as well, on Don't Mind If I Do. To be fair, the guitar playing throughout the album is pretty good. Whether that's Rossi, Parfitt or Pip, the three of them, you've got three great guitar players there who all have their own special thing that they bring to musical arrangements as guitar players. So it's quite a good album if you're a guitarist.
Yeah, I think so. I remember a couple of guitarists on YouTube years and years ago who had a go at Don't Mind If I Do, and I thought that was an unusual choice, considering the usual thing for a Quo guitarist is like Whatever You Want and Down, Down and stuff. But it shows that there is an inventiveness there, and it does. I think it appeals to old school Quo fans because of the solo element of it. It's along the lines of Don't Waste My Time in terms of its solo, because it's melodic.
Yeah.
So I Know You're Leaving, which to me, I heard it on CD. I loved it. First time I heard it, I was going through bereavement, and it just struck me. You stood outside the hospital, and there's this song in your ear, and it's I Know You're Leaving, but I can't understand why what we had must come to an end. Which, lyrically, it's beautiful. It's a little bit REO Speedwagon in its kind of thing. And when I heard it on record, it lost some of its power for some reason. I think when it's in context of everything else, it's like it feels like a weak link, but on its own, you know, in an iPod era of just like playlists of maybe similar stuff, it works. But yeah, what are your thoughts on it?
It does stick out, and I think there's two reasons for that. The first one is that it's not written by the band. And the second reason is they hated it. So it sticks out for that reason. The record company were quite keen to have some more ballads on the album. They hated the idea of Burning Bridges being on it, and that they were really quite keen to get some sort of middle of the road, album orientated rock ballads on the album. And there must have been some sort of publishing agreement between the record company and these songwriters that this one was suggested, and they recorded it after the album had been finished, allegedly. And they really didn't want to do it, but it was done because they just wanted the album out. Personally, I think it's a great song. Compositionally, it's great, and there's some nice moments on it. I was disappointed to hear that it's not real fretless bass, because it's the only example I can remember of having fretless bass on a Quo record, almost like Pino Palladino would on Paul Young records. You know Paul Young?
Mm-hmm.
But apparently, according to Rhino, it was done on a Moog synth. Because he couldn't be bothered learning it for fretless. It was really, I wouldn't say it was rushed, but it was certainly not given the same sort of treatment that the other tracks were given, just because they wanted it done and out of the way. As a song, I think it's lovely, and it's a good lyric from, it's a good vocal from Rossi. Oh, and Rick sings the middle eight, doesn't he?
He does, which is a very old school Quo thing.
Really old school, really old school. I like it though. But yeah, I agree. It does stick out on the record. It does stick out.
Let's move on from that to Cross That Bridge, which is a John David composition. Of course it is. He'd already written Rolling Home. They'd later record a bunch of recordings. If you're listening to this podcast, you know what they are. Yeah, Cross That Bridge. I saw in Wikipedia it says country violin. It seems really odd when compared to everything else, but it's the first track on the album where you can go, that's Status Quo, which
totally,
which perhaps is to its detriment because it's the lighter side of Status Quo. I
agree. I love John David's writing. I always feel like it's quite, the lyrics seem quite, I've got to be very careful how I word this. You don't need to think about the lyrics a lot. They're quite on the nose lyrically, John David songs. But what they have in abundance is catchy melody. And they really do have it in abundance. And to be honest, I think that's what attracts certainly Francis to that material more than anything. It's just the catchiness of the material. I know the whole band loved that cut. They really did love it, and I think it was mooted for a single release in Europe that didn't happen, because there's some footage of them miming to it on Spanish TV.
On a TV show, which is very bizarre. And I should also point out the country accent, the American accent that Rossi puts on the vocals, which I assume was on the demo, because if you listen to some of John David's demos, Quo pretty much mimic them to the letter, except till maybe Better Take Care on the Backbone album. But before that, it's very much to whatever he laid down.
Yeah, I think that I've heard them say in interviews, and I've heard Rhino say this as well, sometimes you've kind of got to make the lyric work and to make the melody and the phrasing work, sometimes you do have to do a little bit of a strange accent or pronounce a word a bit funny. I could never understand why they used to pronounce rain as rain. I could never understand that. But now, as a slightly more experienced musician, working in studios and stuff, I know that sometimes that pronunciation can really give a certain phrase or word weight and spotlight a lyric that you want to spotlight. So I'm not as harsh on people for doing the American accent thing anymore. When I was younger, I used to hate it, but I kind of accept it now.
Well, we'll just have to wonder what he's saying on the spoken word bits in the middle. But love is strange, love is something, love is something. That's the kind of trouble I need, or something. It's like, what's going on here?
To be honest, I've always liked those little. They almost feel ad-libbed. I like stuff that sound, even when it's really a solid part of the composition. I love stuff sounding off the cuff, and this album's got little bits of that, with those little spoken word things, like you say. So yeah, I'm not quite sure what those lyrics are either. I'll have to look them up.
I think if an American singer did it, it would sound more natural. I think that's the thing. It sounds slightly unnatural.
Glenn Campbell would have been all over that track.
Yeah, I think so. John Denver, Glenn Campbell, somebody like that. And I think that's normally what John David has in his mind when he writes these things, because it is on that sort of country element of it. Let's talk about track 8, or as I sometimes call it, fairground music. Cream of the Crop. Which was supposed to be a single, and I think they performed it live, and Rossi went, nah, too many words. Could you
exactly.
imagine?
Too many words and too fast.
Could you imagine in 2022 if Cream of the Crop had been Burning Bridges successful and they'd still had to perform it? I think sometimes when they release these singles in this era and they don't do very well, I think sometimes they go, oh, thank goodness that didn't do very well, or we'd still have to be performing Who Gets the Love.
Which is a great track, by the way, but we'll come on to that.
We will.
Cream of the Crop, it is very fast, and it's very high. I'm nerdy about Quo. I'm not so nerdy as to be absolutely certain of this fact, but I'm pretty sure it's the highest note Francis Rossi ever hits on a studio vocal on this track, on the Rosalie line.
Yeah, it's up there somewhere, isn't it?
Yeah, it sounds like tube line, doesn't it? The Rosalie line. And Bernie Frost is singing a third above that, hitting like a D natural above that B flat, Rossi's B flat, which is high. It is really high. Catchy, a little too fast. It does feel rushed. I can imagine Jeff, just having a field day with that click track. Because he's like a little wind-up toy, isn't it? You just like wind him up and let him go, and he's like, phew! Which I love. I love Jeff's drumming. And again, for him to make that track groove as much as he does is pretty impressive, because it's quick, and normally the quicker something is, the less feel it has in it. It might be exciting, but the accuracy and the groove often gets lost, and it doesn't on that track.
Now, we should note that there's a lot of synth on this track, as there is. Is this a Paul Wickens track?
Almost definitely. Andy was involved with in the army, and even more so with and complaining, but ultimately in their attempt to modernize their sound, they're experimenting with a lot of equipment, and that equipment at the time required someone who really knew what they were doing with it to make it do what they wanted. And that guy was Paul Wickens, or Wix Wickens as he's known in the industry, who's had a ridiculously good career as lots of different things, but he's played in McCartney's band, he's done loads of stuff. And he was brought in by Rick Parfitt and Pip Williams for Rick's solo album, I believe. And he just kind of stuck around and ended up playing a lot of keys on Quo tracks. So all the piano stuff that you hear is Andy. But almost all the synth stuff is Paul Wickens. And that's probably down to Pip and Rick, and to a certain degree Francis, who really wanted that hit record in America, and they thought that sort of slick, modern, like you say, Stock Aitken Waterman sound, that's what they thought was going to do it.
Yeah. We should say to Andy, don't worry, we got you, man. We've got you. Yeah. Because people have spent the last 35 years slating him, going, oh, his keyboards are all over the place. He got over the top with keyboards. It's like, that's not Andy.
Yeah, it's not him. It's not him. organ and piano is Andy's bag.
Exactly.
And I tell you what, he is flipping phenomenal at both.
Oh, yeah.
And do you know, he's a great bass player as well. To be honest, he's the kind of guy that makes you a bit sick, really. He's so talented. He's a great writer. He's a great producer. Phenomenal bass player, piano player, organ player, guitar player even. And he comes in for so much unfair flack from the fans that it's getting quite annoying now.
Yeah, because that isn't him. He also wrote Heart and Hold as well, but we'll talk about that next year. I did find that funny in your book where they basically said, well, we wrote this song and we thought we didn't know where it was going to go, and then Quo just recorded it. It's like...
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I suspect a lot of that went on,
Yeah.
Just, we need another track, and someone goes, I've got something that we did a couple of years ago, and like gets a little cassette out,
Exactly. We need to hear these cassettes. We need to hear these things that might be floating about, especially with this AI technology that's now coming,
God, yeah.
where they can remix things. I mean, goodness.
I'd love to hear, if anyone's out there that's good at this AI thing, I'd love to hear Francis Rossi singing You're the Voice by John Farnham, because that was originally mooted to be a track on this album.
Yeah.
In fact, there was even for a very small amount of time, they were even going to name the album after the single, I believe. But yeah, I'd love to hear what Francis's vocal actually sounds like.
Yeah, I think The Greatest Fighter was one of the album titles that was in development, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. And the record company made them take that track off of the album, and therefore they had to change the name of the album. But that track went in favour of I Know You're Leaving.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, Greatest Fighter is a bit except Rossi's solo version from his solo album.
It's great.
That's
great.
Good. Yeah.
I'd love to hear. I'd love to see a re-release of that because the tracks are all wrong on it. I don't know if you know about this, but things like King of the Doghouse and Give Myself to Love, they're the wrong mixes that ended up getting released. So I'd love to get like Cherry Red to do a 2-disc version with the original, and then the other one with the demos and the actual mixes, especially for King of the Doghouse, because I think that's a bloody good album, personally.
It is. Something else to get you on at a later stage.
Oh man, I love how nerdy this gets. It's brilliant.
It's great. Yeah, we're about to run out on the Zoom, but
okay.
We will be back after this short break. Oh dear, I can get a drink. I never stopped this recording down here, so it's just caught me listening to The Loving Game to remind myself what that sounds like, although I don't need to. Mainly because, yeah, maybe I do need to. It's not great.
It gets a lot of hate, that track, The Loving Game. Rhino told me I was mentally ill for liking it.
And is that on the record?
Yeah.
That's on the record. Okay.
That's on the record. Look, I know it's a bit twee in places. It does motor on, that track. It really motors on. And like I said before, you can't fault the playing. You just can't. The playing on it is great. And, all right, the lyrics a bit on the nose, a bit cheesy or whatever. But I don't care. It's just a track that has so much life in it. For a track that they don't actually like. Jeff doesn't like it either, allegedly. But Rhino in particular flipping hates that track. He wishes I think he thinks it's the worst thing he's ever done.
The chorus is okay, but yeah, the verses lyrically, I mean, there's something in there about we're going to have a party and we're going to rock and roll. It's kind of 1982 levels of cringe lyrically.
Yeah. The lyrics probably needed work, but melodically it's pretty strong. And the playing and the feel of the track is quite good. The thing is, that's the kind of thing, if you take the lyric out and just had that as an instrumental track, the fans would have bloody loved that.
Yeah.
Because pardon the expression, it rocks. And it could have been on a Def Leppard B-side. It's it might not have been a hit record, but there's definitely some charm to that track. But I know I'm very much on my own in that respect.
I think you are, because I think it is one I skip. I skip it. It's one of Parfitt's kind of deeper, almost like rock voice type things. And he's just done better rock voice type things on albums either side of this one. Overdose being an example of when he tries to do
track that is.
The rock thing.
What a track.
Or Man Overboard, like those things are just, there are examples of him doing that along with this, but they're just better, I think. Lyrically, maybe musically, but this one in particular, it fits in with what they're doing. It's kind of experimental, I guess. It's kind of rock, but yeah,
it's one of them tracks that if you'd have put it on the level, again, take the lyrics out, take the lyrics and the melody away, and just have that backing track. You can imagine, the kind of three of them stood at the front of the stage, like Lancaster period, just smacking that rhythm out. Because again, it's quite rapid. It's quite a fast track. I think it had potential as a backing track, and the lyric was just a little rushed. But I wouldn't recommend they revisit it. But if in some parallel universe they were to revisit it, a different set of lyrics and a slightly altered melody could turn that into a pretty good Quo track.
Let's move on to a Rossi sung track, which was a single, but not a very successful one, although it did reach the top 40. Who Gets the Love? Does this song get the love? That's really cheesy, but let's go with it. We'll go period appropriate.
Well, for what it's worth, I love that track. I really love it, and it gets a lot of hate, and I understand why. It's a little cheesy. It's very slick production, very, very slick production. But there's a 12-inch mix of it. And I don't know if you've heard the 12-inch mix,
yes.
But there's an extra guitar solo on it. And oh man, it's so good.
It's like a Spanish guitar solo, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's definitely Pip, because it's so well thought out. It's not improvised, it's really composed. And it's played on like a clean Strat. And it just sounds it's such a good guitar solo. And it's for guitar players, it's worth studying, because it's not your standard minor pentatonic fare. It's lots of chromaticism in it. It's just a really good solo. But as a track, I think it's quite a pretty song. I thought the video was okay. And again, it was an attempt at getting Quo to, I don't want to use the phrase grow up, but it kind of was this attempt to make Quo more marketable to, housewives and, people coming back after a long day at the office. It's like yuppie music. Music for yuppies,
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that per se. So rather than marketing music towards the denim-clad great unwashed, it was instead marketed as, adult contemporary, contemporary adult rock music. And I think that track works in that respect.
Yeah, I think so. And that video is really well, because it actually tells a story. It's not just the band performing. And a similar video, they didn't really make too many like it, because Ain't Complaining is just kind of just band messing about stuff that you get that they've done since on Burning Bridges, Not At All, stuff like that. Whereas this is up there with things like Little Dreamer, where they've gone
I love
for
that video too.
It's great, isn't it? It's great.
I mean, in the modern arena, you probably wouldn't make a video quite as seedy as that. It's a little. Ooh, is that all right now? It was all right in the 80s. I don't know whether you could get away with making a video like that now, but it's It's a great video, really well directed. I can't remember who directed either of those videos, to be honest, but they're both really good, and they show the band as like Rick's got a bit of a beard going on in the Who Gets the Love video, and he just looks so cool. He just looks just really cool, and when he sings the middle eight on that, like he does again, it's a really good delivery from him, and I love the footage of him in the studio as well. It's just really well lit and really well shot. I just think it's a great release.
And he sings the middle eight too, which, you know, kind of elevates it, and great solo, as you say. And that extended version, I love the way that crunchy guitar, you got that synth in there, and then that crunchy guitar comes in with that like that's really atmospheric. Certainly through headphones. And I think this is the thing with this album. Before we came on here, I listened to most of the album with headphones, and it is one of those. I think if you just put it on you know, on a little set of speakers or on your phone or something, you don't really get the full effect of all the little flourishes that they put in the stereo effect. And certainly,
what I love about that album, do you know the album Brothers in Arms by Dire Straits?
Yeah.
It's so clean. I mean, it's one of my favourite albums of all time. It's so clean and crisp. And that's the closest Quo ever got to that, I think, with Ain't Complaining. That really, it's very digitally recorded. You know, so it doesn't have the warmth of, you know, the analog process. But what it does have in abundance is like crisp, clear, almost like a glassy character to it. And I love it. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, it's certainly of its time. I mean, they couldn't have kept going with that, and I'm glad that they kept kind of reinventing it. You know, but yeah, let's go on to Burning Bridges. We're nearly there, nearly in the home straight. Burning Bridges is not the closing track, which you'd expect for like a hit single, but I guess when they were making the album, they didn't think that. Obviously, we all know the story. Andy Bowen's waiting in the next room to tell me that he took it from an old Irish jig called Darby Kelly, heard his daughter playing it on recorder. I think I can hear him now. I mean, that's literally a well-worn story. But it works in this setting and quite ingenious, and shows the musicality of Andy Bowen to hear something and go, well, I play in this band, you know, that's trying to do something different. And it sounds like Quo, but it doesn't sound like Quo. So when you hear a tribute band, or even the band themselves, play it in concert, it still sounds good against everything else.
Yeah, I think it's a masterstroke recording that, and certainly releasing it as a single, because it was a pretty big hit single, that. And it was one of them that in the studio, the band, with the exception of Rossi and Andy, the band were just totally perplexed by it, flummoxed by this. What the hell is this that we're doing? And then it wasn't until they went in and heard the playback that they went, oh, actually, this has something about it. This could work. And you know, you only have to look at the live gigs. The place goes nuts, doesn't it, when they play it? And it's such a catchy melody. You see, there's 3 melodies in there. Well, I suppose you could argue there's 4 melodies in that track, because you've got the lead vocal doing one of them, but you've got the da 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 da, but then you've got ba da 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 da. It's just full of tunes. It's just ram-packed full of catchy melodies that don't bear an awful lot of resemblance to each other. And I love playing it. If ever I sit down with a guitar, my fingers naturally kind of gravitate to that little riff. It's such a beautiful thing. And I think Muse used to insert a little bit of it into their live shows, didn't they? Mm-hmm. I think it's a great track. Really great playing from everyone. Allegedly, Andy did the keyboard part in one pass. He did it on the first pass, which is tricky because it's a horrible key. And it changes to another horrible key, certainly for keys anyway. Lots of black notes in it. And it's not a very comfortable shape to play on the guitar either. there's a lot of fourths in it, and it's just a tricky little passage. But it's such a great track.
I mean, the video itself is a bit cheesy and perhaps set them on the road to what would later become more gimmicky. But the use of dollies, in that thing is genius. Obviously, the movable things. I mean, I've tried moving those things, and the fact they did them on tracks and that you can see that, it's all very meta.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I kind of like it. The video has a certain charm to it, and I don't know whose idea that would have been, possibly management's at the time, but it's just one of those really. It's a classy record. But it's fun as well. That's the thing. Some people think that classy means it can't be fun. It's classy in the way it's recorded, but it's fun in the way it's written and delivered. Yeah, I play it regularly, that track. The 12-inch mix of that is very strange, though. Have you heard the 12-inch mix of that with all the pitch-shifted vocals?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't listen to that version very often. But yeah, the original album. What's the deal with cutting that opening line on the single version?
I don't know.
Because I don't know what. It's such a strange choice. If you were going to trim it down, you'd trim the last chorus down, or you'd fade it out early, or cut an instrumental section. You wouldn't cut the opening line out, would you? It's just a very weird decision.
Well, yeah, you wouldn't cut it out. I mean, it's like on the Accident Prone single back in 1978, cutting out essentially the best verse. The album version has got a. If you're a fan of that album, welcome. But no, if you listen to the album version of Accident Prone, he talks about modus operandi, which I thought was really clever, right? But in the single version, it skips straight to the second verse, and you're like, but why would you get rid of the thing that sticks in your head? Because if you're listening to a track on the radio and then you're talking to someone, you'd say in that instance, it's the track with, I heard a song on the radio. I don't know who it is. They're talking about modus operandi.
Totally.
Whereas, I wouldn't treat a dog that way. It just makes it more cheesier than it needs to be. It works well in context. But yeah, in terms of burning bridges, cutting out that opening line.
Very strange choice. I can only imagine that some like bonkers record exec thinking that was a good idea. Because I don't think the band had a lot to do with the extended remixes and stuff. I think that was mostly in-house record company engineers cutting stuff and splicing stuff up.
My favourite extended from this era is Running All Over the World. The extended on that is so ridiculous with all the pitch shifting, the sampling, and like the heavy stuff. And it's just marvellous what they were doing in this, basically just going, just make some weird extended mix and fans will buy it.
Yeah, and they did.
Yeah. Let's talk about Magic, which is the closing words. It's a bit rambly, that one. In the verses, very rambly. It's like da 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 da. It's like, okay, it's a bit of a strange rhythm. But I like it. It's going in that 80s-ness of it, I guess.
It's a very Rossi Frost thing, that. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a track that whenever I see it written down, whenever I'm thinking of something to play, I'll pick the album up. I'm like, oh yeah, Magic's on that. I think, But if I do play it, I always think, actually, this is a lot better than I remember. It does come over a lot better, and there's that lovely flamenco Spanish guitar solo on it, which is lovely. It's not long. It's just a nice solo delivered on nylon string. Beautiful. And again, a really catchy melody. I can imagine the lyrics rubbing up the old school fans the wrong way. But as a song, again, catchy, and you can't fault the playing. No.
I sometimes used to get confused with it because it feels like it's got like 2 or 3 choruses in it that are all different. It feels like it's a lot of things stuck together because the chorus itself, it's magic, everything else has had it. And then there's like that, just call me and you know I'll be there. These are all things that could actually be choruses in their own right.
Totally, yeah. That just call me and you know I'll be there bit is probably the best bit of the track. Actually, it's just weird that I think with Rossi and Frost. I mean, I like what they achieved together. I thought they wrote some excellent songs between them. But I think whenever they nail the melody, they go for a cheesy lyric, and vice versa. And I think that's why they never got the love that partnership perhaps deserved from the original Quo fans, the early 70s Quo fans, is just because they like things a little more grungy and a little darker and a little more, I don't know, sexy, I suppose. And that's not what Rossi and Frost were about. But yeah, the long and short of it is, I think Magic's a pretty good track. I think it's a good album, frankly.
Yeah, I think that's the way to look at it. It's got its detractors, because if you're comparing it, it's a bit like Thirsty Work. If you're comparing it to the previous material, maybe it doesn't stand up so well, but as an album in its own right, it's okay.
Yeah, I agree.
It's okay, because there's just there's so much experimentation going on when you realize what these musicians have done in the past. And the thing is, all those bands, I mean, Rolling Stones in the mid-'80s were doing some weird stuff. You know.
It's to expect a band or any musician or any artist, for that matter, in any discipline, not to experiment and not to try and evolve and grow, is unreasonable. And artists should be allowed to make mistakes. They should be allowed to make records that don't fit in with their oeuvre, and they should be able to make records that don't sound like their other records. Mm-hmm. It's one of the few joys of being a self-employed artist, is that you express yourself as you want, and if your influences change, then the sound of your art changes. And if the technology you're surrounded by changes, then again the sound of your art changes. And that's what they were doing. I think they were so keen to have a hit in America that perhaps they took their eye off the ball here. But fundamentally, I don't think it's an album they should be ashamed of. I think it's an album that's very indicative of what they were going through as a band at the time.
Yeah, and I do hear a lot of talk about the B-sides of that era that could have been on this album. I've got the deluxe edition here, which has got things like Halloween, Reason for Goodbye, Greatest Fighter. Reason for Goodbye is one of those tracks that if they'd gone a bit more Quo with the album and less AOR, MOR, whatever OR it is, then Reason for Goodbye would have been, right up the top of there of things they could have done.
It's a great track,
but
it's such a catchy song, and like you say, very Quo-like.
I think there's a slide guitar in that too.
Possibly.
Yeah, it's been a while since I heard it properly, but it's, it is one of the stronger B-sides. I mean, in this era, and in the army now, the B-sides were basically offcuts from elsewhere, just kind of filled it. I mean, Halloween is from Rick's solo album that was never released.
Yeah. When I was researching the book, I was really kind of scratching my head about how much went on between the recording of those tracks for recorded delivery, Rick's solo album, and the release that they eventually found as B-sides on Quo Records. And from what I can tell, there is a little bit of guitar added. Rossi and Co may have added little bits and pieces, little overdubs here and there. But fundamentally, what we hear on those B-sides would have been the sound of recorded delivery as an album. And I'd love to hear it released. I don't think it'll ever happen, but I'd love to hear it released.
I think some kind of demixing would be in order to make sure it wasn't quite so dated. It all depends. I've always wondered about this, because when something like Ain't Complaining is laid down, you say it could be synth drums rather than actual drums. So certainly we know about the invention of gated drums. It was sort of Phil Collins and Genesis and the microphone in the room and, that story. But the thing is that the way it's recorded onto tape? Or is there a version somewhere, that's unmixed, that doesn't have all these embellishments on it?
I see what you mean. Without all the processing, you mean?
Well, yeah.
I would say there probably is somewhere in a vault somewhere at Universal Records. Was it on Mercury, that album? Or Universal? It was a Vertigo release.
It was a Vertigo release, yes.
Yeah. I think there must be some original multi-tracks lying around somewhere. And quite often, what would happen was there'd be a mixture of live drums and synth drums playing kind of in unison. Certainly with snares, they would just kind of hit the snare when, after the drums had been recorded, and kind of they'd either replace them or double it up. To kind of get that gated sound without actually having to do any gated reverb processing. That was kind of the beauty of sampling at the time, and still is, I suppose. But no, that's an interesting question. I'd love to. I mean, what they did with the Rockin' All Over the World release was so cool. When they got that remixed by John Eden, I'd love to see. To be honest, I've always wanted to see him do one of those classic album documentaries. I don't even care what album they do it about. I just want to see them multi-tracks. Even if they did it with Backbone, I don't care. I just want to sit in front of that desk and like solo up the hi-hats and, the bass drum and hear what the backing vocals are doing. I'd have a field day.
I mean, yeah, as much as Backbone would be great to some fans, others would be like, yeah, but I want to hear, Dog of Two Head or something.
I mean, the irony is that Dog of Two Head was probably recorded with like 4 or 5 mics, straight to 8-track, probably. They'd have probably put two mics on the drums, couple of mics on the guitars, DI'd bass, and a vocal overdub. If that's assuming they didn't cut everything live. I suppose if they were going to do it for any of them, it probably would be either Rockin' All Over the World or whatever you want. But I'd love to just have some insight into their recording processes and how they went about stacking stuff up and layering, and certainly with vocals, because that, to be honest, that's really Pip Williams's speciality, is vocal arrangements. The vocal arrangements on his 80s Quo albums are so good. I was listening the other day that I totally forgot was on there. On Overdose, which is one of my favourite Quo tracks, full stop. There's on some of the later pre-choruses, the band are like chanting like, ooh, ah, ooh. Oh man, it's just such an inspired choice. It just adds so much, and it's not something you notice on the first listen. But that's definitely a Pip Williams thing. I love that bloke. I'd love to see him on this show.
So would I, along with many people. And obviously it depends on availability, their availability, my availability, but we will work on it because I think in terms of this, like I said earlier, I don't think Pip really gets asked about the late 80s too much, except in maybe a scorning way. I think he was asked about Perfect Remedy in one of the documentaries. But other than that, it's very rarely touched, which, of course, your book managed to fill in some of the gaps of that, certainly. So, yeah, that is Ain't Complaining, 35 this year. Thanks for joining us, Greg.
No, it's a pleasure. It always is, Jamie. Thanks so much for having me.